Hello, everybody. Welcome to Week 15. It's the second half of the first round. You're listening to the longest-running, league-oriented fantasy football podcast, The KAEP. The only way they're going to catch up is if we slow down, and you know that's not going to happen. In the first half of the first round, we had 3 close games and 2 that were not so much. Feast or famine, if you remember. Hurricane Laura playing Nick and his Killer Bees. Laura took a 3-point lead in the first half of the first game. Las Vegas's own Derek Carr, he led the way along with Jonathan Taylor. They had 24.7 and 28.5 points, respectively. For Nick, Russell Wilson finally returns to early season form. He had been struggling as of late, but he put in 28.1, and then David Montgomery, his third game, over 20 points. He had 21.5 points. Laura with a 3-point lead. Next, we had Northern Kid, Jared Kobasic, playing against Peter and I Love TDs. Jared had Mini Goat. He put up 34 points even, and that was about it. It was a one-man show in the first half. While Peter and I Love TDs, his roster blew up. Nick Chubb with 22.3 points. But the stunner, Washington defense and special teams, they came up with 24.7 points versus the Niners. Thus, Peter had a 33-point lead at the end of the first half. Then we had the Guzman Bowl. It was Juan Guzman and his Orange Crush facing his familia, Pedro Guzman da Chief. Pedro, despite having 2 players with 0 points, manages to keep it at only a 7-point deficit. Thanks to Tyreek the Streak Hill, he had 23.1 points. And Kyler Murray, a staple in his offense, put up 18 points even. Juan's roster didn't really have someone that blew up, but it was pretty consistent scoring. Devontae Adams, 17.5, Deshaun Watson, 16.4, and even Kenyon Drake got in the mix. He had 15 points. At halftime of the Guzman Bowl, Juan held a 7-point lead over his familia. Then in the games that really mattered, Josue and his Raider Nation was facing RJ, rolling with my homies, and rolling with my homies ran into the buzzsaw that is Josue. Points across the board for Raider Nation. Kelsey, 19.6, Ridley, 18.4, Justin Herbert, 17.3. RJ's biggest scorer was no surprise, Patrick Mahomes, but what is a surprise is that was his leading scorer, 18.7 points, and when your lead scorer has 18.7 points, that is not a good sign. His roster fell flat. He finished with only 70.9 points, falling behind by 30 points. Finally, it was Joey and his Viking Nation facing Jordan and his Rona season. The early projections had Joey down big time, but his roster looked at that and said, for sure. Miles Sanders, 25.6 points. Stephon Diggs, 19.1. Dalvin Cook, 17.0. Ronald Jones, 14.4. The tables had turned until one King Henry for Jordan took to the field, puts up another 200-yard-plus day, and brings him back and actually gives him a 2-point lead. King Henry, 39.2 points. We've been teasing a special episode of The KAEP for the last few weeks. Well, you'll get all your answers at the end of this episode, as well as something that the league has never done. Stay tuned to that. We are now off to the second half of these games. Winners and losers decided this week. Here we go, Jim. We start with Hurricane Laura versus Nick and his Killer Bees. They both had a vested interest in the Thursday night game, both of them with Raiders. Nick, he had Homeboy, who rushed for 76 yards and a touchdown for 17.4 points. Laura had Derek Carr, and Derek Carr comes away with 1.6 points. If you were anyone other than Hurricane Laura, you would have chalked up those 1.6 points on a bad performance, but this is Hurricane Laura. In the final minutes of the first quarter, a non-contact pulled groin for Derek Carr. He would leave the game with that season-ending injury. I know there's only like 2 weeks left, but that still counts. Oh, Laura. Apparently bad luck doesn't take a day off. but you would get a boost from the Buffalo Bills defense and special teams in that Saturday game. They put up 14.2 points for a touchdown, a fumble recovery, and 19 points allowed. And this return for the touchdown by the big man, Hughes. With moves like that, you got to put him in the slot. What a piece of running by the big man. That might be the big man play of the year. Laura would get another boost from Jonathan Taylor running downhill against that Houston defense. He put up 15.5 points, 83 yards, and a touchdown. Heck, even Logan Thomas, tight end for the Washington football team, put in 10.1 points. And Laura, you had to like what happened to Russell Wilson in that same Washington football team. That defense holds the Seahawks to 20 points, and more specifically, Russell Wilson to 12.8 points. In the Tennessee game, Laura would get even more life. Corey Davis, 17 points even, including this bomb. 4 receptions, 110 yards, and that touchdown for 17 points even. It looked like we might have another close half for this matchup. Nick's roster, however, respawns. DeAndre Hopkins, 21 points even, 9 receptions, 169 yards, and these 2 catches. Oh, there you go, D-Hop. Where have those type of catches been this season? Spectacular catches from one of the premier wide receivers in the National Football League, D-Hop, 21 points even. Mark Andrews, 12.6 points. And then David Montgomery, his 4th straight game with over 20 points, and it would be the highest score of those 4 games, 28.2 points for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns. That is all Nick would need. A 3-point deficit ends up being a 35-point rout. Laura losing the game, losing her quarterback. That's par for the course in this 2020 season. She would go on to face the loser of the Peter and I Love TD's game versus Jared Kovacic, while Nick would advance. He would play the loser of the Guzman Bowl. We now go to Landover, Maryland. The matchup between Northern Kid and I Love TD's, Jared versus Peter. It was the battle of tight ends on that Thursday night game. Jared had Las Vegas' own Darren the Baller Waller. Another huge game. 9 receptions, 150 yards, and a touchdown for 21 points even. Peter had Hunter Henry, one of his better games of the year. 5 receptions, 65 yards, and a touchdown for 12.5 points. And thus, Jared would begin to chip away at that 33-point lead. On Saturday, Jared had Mini Goat versus the Panthers. A good matchup, but he would come up with 143 yards, 2 total touchdowns, only 18.9 points. And the Mason Crosby watch tallies 8 points for the kicker. Jared would play J.D. McKissick, running back from the Washington football team. He came up with his best game of the year, figures, 51 yards, a receiving touchdown for 16.7 fantasy points, as well as James Robinson against that Baltimore defense, 11.3 points, and this receiving touchdown. James Robinson showing the concentration and the hands. That is one heck of a catch for a running back. James Robinson just became one of my favorite players with that reaction to his touchdown. His team down by 26 points. Athletes across all sports should take note. Peter would keep pace though. A.J. Brown, his day is salvaged late in the 4th quarter with a touchdown. He had 10.4 points. The 2 rookies, J.K. Dobbins and Brandon Ayuk. J.K. Dobbins finds the end zone, 14.1 points. And in that shootout between Dallas and San Francisco, Brandon Ayuk would continue to impress. 9 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown for 13.3 points. And the play that would drive fantasy owners mad, C.J. Beathard to Kendrick Bourne. The Hail Mary answered, but I'm pretty sure no one started C.J. Beathard, Kendrick Bourne, or that Dallas defense, if that's what you want to call it. In the Sunday night game, Jared, starting Jarvis Landry, would get a touchdown for 12.1 points, but Peter had Nick Chubb in that same matchup. He pretty much equals that score with 12.6 points. That sealed the deal for Peter and I Love TDs until the second quarter of the Monday night game where Big Ben had negative 4 points at one point. Peter's 33-point lead had dwindled down to 7, but Big Ben would semi-recover and only scored 7 points, and that's fine by me as long as he didn't lose another 7 points. So with the victory, Peter and I Love TDs would play the winner of the Guzman Bowl, and with Hurricane Laura and Nick the game done and in the books, Jared knew that his next opponent would be Hurricane Laura in that bottom seed. Both Nick and Peter looking at that Guzman Bowl, seeing who they were going to be playing against. Aside from the Super Bowl, the Guzman Bowl would be the most anticipated bowl of the season. Juan and his Orange Crush facing Pedro Guzman, the Chief. They both had Packers in that Saturday game. Pedro had Aaron Jones, the real Aaron if you ask me. He rushes for 145 yards and a touchdown for 21.8 points. And Pedro, he looks to be back in form. Another big day for Aaron Jones. With Aaron Jones hogging up the targets, that would leave Davante Adams with very little, only 4.2 points for the game. In that same game, Juan started tight end Ryan Tunyon for the Packers. He found the end zone for 7.8 points. Ryan Tunyon quietly matches Travis Kelce for the most touchdowns so far this season with 10. Kelce has 3 times as many yards, so there you go. The Guzman Familia would also have 2 kickers in the Saturday game. Jay Sly for Pedro off of Carolina comes up with 10 points, and Tyler Bass, place kicker for the Buffalo Bills, does him 2 better with 12 points. Pedro has Tyreek the Streak Hill. Not only is he the fastest man in the NFL, he's got quite a pair of hands on him, laying out to make this catch. Juan with Deshaun Watson against that Indianapolis defense. He shines 23.7 points for 373 yards, 2 touchdowns, this one being the easiest he'll throw in his career.
Oh, nobody covered the white boy.
On Sunday, it all came crashing down on Juan. Kyler Murray, 406 yards, 4 total touchdowns, 1 interception for 40.1 points for Kyler Murray. One of those touchdowns caught by Larry Legend in the second quarter. Oh, Larry, very Tom Brady-esque at his age. Kyler Murray alone outscores the rest of Juan's roster. Juan, it was just not in the cards for you this week. And I hate to use that expression because of what it implies, but when your opponent is trying to run out the clock and he busts a 51-yard touchdown, I'll make an exception for that phrase this week. Chief roars back to take this game 206.7 to 172.0. With these winners and losers decided, Pedro will play Peter and I Love TDs. Juan Guzman and his Orange Crush will face Nick and his Killer Bees in the final 2 weeks of the season. We go to the matchup between the buzzsaw that is Josue playing RJ, rolling with my homies. And the last person you want to play, being down by 30 points, is an opponent with the nickname Buzzsaw. This game was as graphic as it sounds. RJ, he got off to a good start in the Saturday game between the Panthers and the Packers. He had DJ Moore, 13.2 points for 6 receptions, 131 yards, and DJ Moore was balling all game long. They need to start giving out style points for receptions like these. DJ Moore, money. Calvin Ridley for Josue is not one to be outdone. He comes up with 2 spectacular catches of his own and just about twice as many points, 22.3. He had 10 receptions, 163 yards, and a touchdown. How about Alvin the Natural Kamara? Another productive day, 54 yards and a receiving touchdown, a la Patrick Mahomes for 15.4 points. Oh, but look at this. RJ, he's got Deontay Swift, and he comes up with 2 touchdowns and 67 yards, and outdoes the Natural, 18.2 points. RJ also had Patrick Mahomes, as if he needed to show anything else to prove that he's the best quarterback in the National Football League. Hands down, it's not even close. He would show it off in this game. We know he has a gun, but the touch on this pass in the corner of the end zone, that is a GOAT type throw. Mahomes against the Titans last year showed off his legs, and he was showing them off again in this game. You don't see it too much, but Patrick Mahomes motoring around, and as if there were any question about his toughness, Patrick Mahomes takes this hit. Vicious. He was a little slow in getting up, but who wouldn't be? His very next pass attempt throws a dart to Tyreek the Streak Hill. Patrick Mahomes, 254 yards, 3 touchdowns for 29.3 fantasy points. Patrick Mahomes, money. Josue would waste no time in responding. He started Lamar Jackson against Jacksonville. That was a good matchup, and it proved true. 243 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception for 32.8 points. Granted, they were playing a much less opponent than Patrick Mahomes, but when you throw Dez Bryant a touchdown, that gives you the tiebreaker. Lamar Jackson, 32.8 points. Raider Nation would take complete control of the rest of the game. Travis Kelce, do we even have to mention this? 14.8 points. Justin Jefferson, 10.4. Doesn't sound astounding, but RJ, Jonnu Smith, 5.2. Raheem Mostert, 6.8. San Francisco defense and special teams, minus 0.1 point. Although they did get up on Big Red on this play, Josue would add another 20 points to that 30-point lead, and thus the buzzsaw that is Josue. He advances to the title game. Congratulations, brother. One of the best teams all year. You definitely deserve it. Josue will go on and meet the winner of the Viking Nation and Rona season game. RJ, a great season nonetheless. You will face the loser of that Viking Nation and Rona season game. A great year for both of you. The final game of the week. It is Joey and his Viking Nation playing Jordan and his Rona season. The winner would advance and play Josue in the title game. One game into this week, and Joey knew he was in trouble. Jordan with Josh Allen showing up again. 359 yards, 4 total touchdowns, 38.1 points, and he can also motor around. Josh Allen, a true dual threat. The saving grace for Joey was that he had Stephon Diggs, one of those recipients from Josh Allen. He had 11 receptions, 147 yards for 14.7 points. It then got ugly for Joey in the first half of that Atlanta Falcons and Tampa Bay Buccaneer game. Tom Brady has like 2 points at halftime. He rebounded, however, in typical GOAT fashion. He finished the day with 390 yards, 2 touchdowns, a clean game, no interceptions for 23.5 points. But that still fell way short of Josh Allen. Joey has one of the best running backs in the league. Dalvin Cook, he goes for 132 yards and a touchdown for 22 points. Unfortunately, Jordan has probably the best running back in the NFL. King Henry, 147 yards and a touchdown for 23.2 points. And King Henry imposing his will. Oh, you don't want to be in front of King Henry when he's bearing down in front of you. Just dive out of the way and call it a business decision. What further added to Joey's pain was Jordan. He had Mike Evans. He was on the receiving end of a bunch of the GOAT's passes. 6 receptions, 110 yards for 11.0 points. So just as Stephon Diggs deflects a few of Josh Allen's points, Mike Evans deflects some of Tom Brady's points. The rest of Jordan's roster would put up some very pedestrian-like numbers. Evan Engram 4.6, the Chump 3.4, T.Y. Hilton 7.1, Mike Davis 6.1, Will Lutz 3.0. Unfortunately, Joey put up even more pedestrian-type numbers. Dallas Goedert 3.9, Kareem Hunt 2.8, Adam Thielen 7.1, Miles Sanders 9 points. Going into Monday night, Jordan held an 18-point lead. He was done. All he could do was sit back, watch, and pray. Joey had that Pittsburgh defense and special teams unit, the number 1 defense in the NFL. 18 points, well within the reach of that defense. The defense starts with 15 points at the beginning of the game. Points get taken away as the other team score, and points get added as you do return yards, sacks, interceptions. So at the start of the game, it was a 3-point deficit for Joey. Pittsburgh facing the hapless Bengals with the rookie quarterback Finley. Oh, it was lunchtime. And who would have guessed that the Pittsburgh's defense and special teams' biggest enemy was their own quarterback, Big Ben. Turnovers, setting up the Bengals with prime field position, and they would take advantage of it. And the second touchdown by Giovanni Bernard for the Bengals pretty much sealed the deal. Pittsburgh would allow 27 points and have only 1 sack, no turnovers, and ever since that loss to the Washington football team, they have been reeling. 3rd straight loss. 2 of those, however, quality opponents. You got the Buffalo Bills and the NFC East leading Washington football team. Not the kind of ball you want to be playing heading into the playoffs. And it's even worse for fantasy owners. There's no place to head off to except the winner's consolation bracket. RJ will play Joey in the winner's consolation bracket, and the Super Bowl is set. Jordan and his Rona season will face the buzzsaw that is Josue, 2 out of the 3 top scoring teams in the LVFL. And what a treat it would be to see both teams light it up. Hopefully it's a good game, but that's what people that aren't in the Super Bowl say. It's gonna be a clash of 2 LVFL titans. We are off to Tampa Bay. There are the results for this week and the subsequent matchups for week 16 and 17 following the same format that we had these last 2 weeks. Hurricane Laura will face Northern Kid Jared Kobasic. Juan and his Orange Crush will play Nick and his Killer Bees. Peter and I Love TDs will face off against Pedro Da Chief. RJ, rolling with my homies, will be going down to see Joey and his Viking Nation. And in the Super Bowl, Jordan and his Rona season, the designated visiting team, will play the buzzsaw that is Josue, the designated home team, for the prize 200 smackaroos in the form of a gift card to the NFL.com shop. Woo! Tons at stake in the title game. Our season will culminate in just 2 short weeks. Soak it in, everybody. And now the big reveal for that special episode of the KAEP. As you know, during the regular season, we pick out one game to be the game of the week. But the KAEP has selected 5 games that qualify for the game of the year. And that will be decided by your votes when this game of the year video releases. We're gonna put it up this week, so you'll have 2 full weeks to have a chance and check it out. Please text me privately with your vote once you've seen the video. I will be abstaining from the vote unless there's a tie between 2 games. Otherwise, it is you, the owners and viewers, that are gonna decide what the game of the year is gonna be. For the next 2 weeks, the KAEP will not be doing highlights for the title game. The title game will get its own special video. And if you want to see what that's like on our YouTube channel, you can look up title game highlights. It has the title game highlights from the last 2 years, just to give you a flavor of what's going to be done. For the first time in league history, we will have a Pro Bowl team put together for our league. Just how exactly are we going to do that? Stay tuned. We unveiled one mystery and set you up with another. We are finally in championship week. Good luck to all the owners in their games. This is The KAEP, the flagship podcast of the LVFL. And for everyone out there in the LVFL universe, we say good night from league offices.